Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. Chapter 51. Larry and Leo, who we now are going to refer to him as Leo even though his name was Joe earlier in the story. They go off to see Harold. So they travel out kind of to the outskirts of this community, and Harold is the only one who lives out there, which is weird. So they arrive at Harold's house, and he is outside working, and he doesn't know that they're there. And when Larry talks to him, he whips around, and he has this murderous look on his face because he was caught unaware, and we find out that he has to, practice his smile. He's trying to make that his default. He's trying to train himself to smile all the time. I think he's holding a trowel or something in his hand, something that's kind of almost a weapon, and Larry is kind of taken aback, and instantly Harold changes to his politician fake smile, and it's really, really disturbing. So Leo is afraid, and he wants nothing to do with Harold, and he begs Larry to go away with him and not go into the house. And Larry's like, no, we walked all this way. I have to, talk to Harold. You know how much I've been admiring Harold. And so Leo's like, well, I'm going home then. And he heads off. So Harold and Larry kind of share an afternoon, and Harold goes to make some drinks or something like that, and Larry's left alone in the living room, and he notices there's a loose stone in the hearth. And he takes the stone out, and there is the ledger in there, and he quickly covers it up because Harold is coming back. But now Larry is aware of the ledger, and he is kind of not disturbed, but he's a little concerned about who Harold really is. And he got that sense when he was talking to Franny about him, about how Harold is not the guy he built up in his mind, and the way that everyone seems to react about Harold is just this visceral unease. Harold is just so fake, and that makes you wonder, what is he hiding? So Larry leaves. Quote, his parting from Harold was friendly. Harold shook his hand, grinned, told him to come back often, but Larry had somehow gotten the feeling that Harold could give a shit if he never came back. Page 690. So Larry knows that Harold is just going through the motions. He's just saying the things that people expect other people to say. And Larry meets up with Leo, who didn't go all the way home. He was waiting for Larry on a person's front lawn. And Leo thinks that Harold might be, quote, praying to the dark man. Page 693. So Stu and Franny are now discussing Harold, and they're talking about how Stu thinks that Harold is probably mad at him because he originally said he didn't want Franny, and now obviously they're together, and he feels that Harold is holding a grudge against him. And Franny remarks, yet again, on the abrupt change in Harold's demeanor. And as she is saying this and kind of talking through things that cause people to have sudden personality shifts, she thinks, quote, the way people get when they convert to religion or read. She stopped suddenly, and her eyes took on a momentary startled look that seemed very like fear. Page 699. So we know that all of a sudden it's dawning on Franny that she had written about Harold in her diary rather extensively, and if he read that, that could explain things. One of the people in their little committee has declined. The guy, the veterinarian, Dick Ellis, he has too much on his plate. He's like, I can't do the doctor work here and do politician work. So Larry is going to be asked to take the position in his place. Stu asks Larry, he goes off and meets with him and kind of asks him what he feels about Harold and kind of gets a feel for him because he is the new guy in town. And when Stu says, I'd like you to be a part of this committee, to which Larry agrees. He says that this needs to be kept hush-hush, like you can't even tell Lucy any of this stuff. Our meetings are going to be secret, you know, just so you're aware. And Larry kind of bristles a little bit. Quote, I'm not much on cloak and dagger, Stu. I better get that up front, because it might save a hassle later. I think what happened in June happened because too many people were playing it a little too close. That wasn't any act of God. That was an act of pure human fuckery. Page 702. So Stu counters with, yeah, I don't like the cloak and dagger stuff either, but, you know, we are kind of at war, and Flag is out there, he's a bad guy, and we need to have some secrecy and some plans that don't get, like, shared around. And Stu says, quote, but Mother Abigail says it won't be over, one way or the other, until he's got us or we've got him. Page 702. So while Stu is away and he is asking Larry to join this committee, Franny decides to pull out her diary because, you know, she's had that thought. It's a mostly abandoned diary now. She doesn't really write in it very much, and she feels nervous and scared and apprehensive. Quote, her baby was alive and safe, and this was just a book, and anyhow, there was no way to tell if a book had been read, and even if there was a way, there would be no way to tell if the person who had read it had been Harold Lauder. Page 704. So, conveniently, she finds a dried chocolate thumbprint on the page describing her sexual encounter with Stu. So, Harold has been eating chocolate bars all across the country. She didn't leave the thumbprint, and she even puts her thumb up to the print and sees that, you know, it's much bigger than hers, and who else? Who else would have read her diary? So, Franny knows, and as we're going to find out, she doesn't tell anyone. We have an ad hoc committee meeting at Stu and Fran's house on the 13th of August, 1990. And they talk about several things. Mother Abigail was, quote, very clear about wanting to be consulted on all matters that have to do with the Dark Man. Page 707. So Mother Abigail isn't really concerned with the day-to-day stuff. She does want to be in the loop, though, whenever it comes to Flag. So if there's any news about Flag, Mother Abigail must be informed. The other thing that they propose doing is sending out 3 spies. Nick proposes this. They're going to send 3 spies out west to get info about Flag's people, and then come back and report. Larry suggests sending the judge, because he's really smart. He is kind of an age where people wouldn't necessarily think that he is a spy, and he's an honorable, good man. Sue suggests Dana Jurgens. You'll remember she was one that Franny thought was going to scoop up Stu. And Nick suggests Tom Cullen. And it seems plausible that they would send someone who has mental disabilities away from their society. So they're going to give Tom a really good, convincing story to kind of recite to Flag and his people. And we've found out that Tom is also susceptible to hypnosis. So they're going to kind of use him as like a sleeper agent, where they give him a backstory that he won't stray from, and they are going to implant in his brain something that will tell him when to come back to them. And also it's a good way for him to retain all the information that he collects. Chapter 52. Mother Abigail goes out into the wilderness. She has some, like, feeling of being too prideful or something like that. She needs to atone for something. And so it's kind of a religious test or something like that. And she goes off into the wilderness, just leaves a note behind, doesn't talk to anyone, and they can't find her. They've looked, and she's just nowhere to be found. Stu is out with Ralph and Harold, and they are looking for Mother Abigail, and Franny takes this time to go break into Harold's house. So she gets there, his door is locked, which is kind of weird in this new society. People haven't really been locking their doors, and his windows are all, shaded. So she sneaks into the basement, and she goes upstairs and has this very foreboding feeling. She ends up sitting on the loose stone that Larry had found, the one that's hiding the ledger. and she's just about to pick it up and see it when someone knocks on the door and freaks her out because she, is already on high alert, and then someone's at the door. Turns out that it's Nadine, and Franny takes that as just, a sign that this is too much for her. She is too freaked out. She has to go. So she doesn't look at the stone. She runs down into the basement, pulls herself out of the basement, but she's left behind a footprint. So Harold is out looking for Mother Abigail, which was his idea, and he is contemplating murdering Stu and Ralph. And at the last minute, his plan is interrupted. So when Harold goes home, he finds out that the door to the basement is ajar, and he didn't leave it that way. And he walks downstairs and he sees a footprint. So he knows that someone has been in there, and he quickly takes the ledger out of its hiding spot and starts thinking about, where can I put this? Because, quote, for the first time it came completely home to him how dangerous the book was. If someone found it, everything was over. He of all people should know that. Hadn't all of this begun because of Fran's diary? Page 737. Yeah, Harold should know better because he found out all that stuff about Fran, and that's what set him off. So if anyone finds his deranged little book of plans, yeah, he's in deep trouble. So back at Stu's house, Glenn bursts in, and he has just the best and yet the most upsetting news. Kojak, the dog from way back in his hometown that he had been hanging out with, the Irish setter, has come back to Glenn. So Kojak traveled all the way from, I don't know if it was Vermont or New Hampshire, somewhere up in there, and he came all the way to Colorado. Quote, that damn dog came back to me. I wish to Christ I hadn't left him behind to come on his own, Stu. That makes me feel so friggin' bad. Page 744. So Kojak was just waiting on Glenn's front porch. He's scrawny, he was beat up, one of his eyes is damaged beyond repair, but he's alive. And Stu is wondering if maybe Kojak had dreams like everyone else has been having, and he followed them through the same method. It's very emotional, and I love a dog story. I also would not ever have left a dog behind. I couldn't. I would have found a way to get Kojak to Colorado with me. Then we have a tiny little segment. This is Kojak's story. So we find out that his real name is Big Steve, and wolves got him in Nebraska. So he was sniffing around Mother Abigail's house. Quote, the scent of the man, the feel of the man, had led to this place and then stopped. 747. So that would be Glenn. Kojak was tracking Glenn. So Kojak fights off 4 wolves. Fights off 2 of the wolves. He retreats to the porch, kills a 3rd wolf that tries to get under the porch with him, and then the remaining wolf is just kind of waiting for him to come out, and he doesn't, and then the wolf gives up. Quote, in the early morning hours, he had felt the presence of some other animal, something that terrified him into a series of soft whimpers. It was a thing in the corn, a thing walking in the corn, hunting for him, perhaps. Kojak lay shivering, waiting to see if this thing would find him, this horrible thing that felt like a man and a wolf and an eye, some dark thing like an ancient crocodile in the corn. Page 748. So Kojak got food and water at Mother Abigail's, he built up his strength a little bit, and he started off again, and he knew how to get there. And then, because Stephen King often does little things that make me so happy, you find out the fate of a character, even though we're not going to read about it. Quote, even when he was an old dog, and Kojak lived another 16 years, long after Glenn Bateman died, those scars would pain and throb on wet days. That's on page 748. So I love the fact that Kojak lived such a long, long life. That makes me very happy. Chapter 53. So this is the for real meeting that takes place on the 18th of August, 1990. So they have all assembled in this auditorium, and they're going to start voting on things. The ad hoc committee is hopefully going to get elected as a permanent committee. Quote, there were 580 people here, and most of them didn't have any idea that Larry Underwood wasn't no nice guy, or that the first person Larry Underwood had attempted to take care of after the epidemic had died of a drug overdose. Page 753. So at this meeting, Larry is, of course, beating himself up because that's what he does, and he is thinking about declining the position. And he is, doubting himself, doubting whether he can be a good leader. So the meeting is actually starting to go very well once it starts. And Larry's thinking, quote, "This was no game they were playing here. This was serious business. Killing business. Maybe worse." Page 757. So they end up ratifying the Constitution and the Bill of Rights immediately, and Harold stands up and suggests that everyone nominated for the committee be voted in across the board. So everyone approves that, and therefore everyone who was in the ad hoc committee is now an official member of the committee. So they end the meeting with a discussion of missing Mother Abigail. She's still gone. Stu and Fran walk home, and Fran mentions that Harold was looking at her feet. So we know that a footprint was left behind, and Harold now suspects Fran. When Larry and Lucy are on their way home, Nadine throws herself at Larry. She tells him that she wants to stay, but she will only do it if she has him. He chooses Lucy, and he rejects Nadine. So Nadine goes off into the mountains with a planchette and her little Vespa motorcycle. She did what she thought was her last attempt to be a good person, which is unfortunate that she waited so long because Larry definitely did want her, but now he's trying to be a nice guy, so he doesn't want to throw over Lucy for Nadine. So Nadine goes up into the mountains, and she had used a planchette once in college, and it was a crazy experience with an aggressive message directed at her. Lots of capital letters shouting, "You'll be my queen if you're pure, you're dead, the world is dead." It ended with, quote, "We are in the house of the dead Nadine," page 781. And while this was happening, no one could take her fingers off the planchette, and it whipped back and forth, frantically writing. It was obviously not staged by these girls that she was playing with. And these girls wanted nothing to do with Nadine afterward. And it says that she never touched a planchette again until now. Quote, "Somewhere the dark man was abroad in the night, and she spoke 2 words, like an incantation to all the black spirits that had ever been. Incantation and invitation. Tell me." And beneath her fingers, the planchette began to write. Page 782. Have a spooky day.